So we did something, yeah. So anyway, we got friendly, and he came back 2 days later with a different friend. He said, Harry, do some tricks, some more for this guy. Then he came back again. But what was happening, I always wanted to do at least one trick that was new to Victor Jory, because he was seeing the same tricks. Like I say, it was finite. I had certain tricks, but I always wanted at least one different trick for Victor Jory. And what started to happen, a month went by, kept bringing in new people. And I got to the point where I didn't know what else to do that I could fool Victor Jory with, to show, a different trick. Okay, I was interested in memory work since I was 8 or 9 years old. And one of the tricks I did was somebody shuffles a regular deck of cards, calls them off in order at that speed, that speed. I used to do it like this with my fingers. And the whole point was when they were finished calling off the 52 cards, I'd say, give me any number from 1 to 52. They'd say 12. I'd say the 12th card is the King of Hearts, and they'd count down, and there it was. Or name a card, and they'd say, I'd tell them where it was, or name a number, I'd tell them which card. The denouement of that trick, after I did that 4 or 5 times, I'd say, what's your favorite royal flush? Which suit? They'd say spades. I'd say 5th, 12th, 28th, 30th, and 42nd. And they look at there with a 5, the 10 of spades, jack of spades, the royal flush.
That's great.
In spades, yeah. So that I was doing when I was very young. And I said, all right, I'll do that. Next time Victor Jory comes in. And to me, it was scraping the bottom of the barrel. It was not a card trick, it was a memory trick, and I didn't think that was that important. Anyway, long story short, again, he comes in, and I do that trick. And I can still visualize this whole thing. I do what I just explained to you, the memory thing.
Right.
Victor Jory stood up and started to applaud in the little club. And he started to speak loud that everybody heard. He said, Harry, he said, the sleight of hand you've done for me this past month is fantastic. It's terrific. But this, what you just... And he started to rave about the memory. That's when the light bulb went off. I said, wait a minute. I thought I did great sleight of hand. He's getting all excited over the memory work, which I thought was, that's what changed my life. It gave me a career.
I've never seen another entertainer, or has anyone ever copied your type of performance where they'll go into the audience and do what you made famous, to recite back the names?
No. There's a guy who wrote a book. I hate to say this, it sounds very egotistical, but modesty is becoming a drag. He wrote, there's a book called The Book of Genius, and he devotes a page to me. But, apropos of your question, at the end he says, we have done a study of this, and in Harry Lorayne's career, he has met and remembered 8,500,000 people approximately. And he wrote it, and he said, that's a record that will never be broken. He started to count up all the appearances. In those days I was doing breakfast shows, luncheon shows, evening, after dinner shows, where I always remembered the names of everybody in the audience. And every television show I did that. So he started to do the math. He said, you've met over 8 million people.
What was the largest audience you were actually able to remember?
Well, when I first started, I was on an ego trip. When I first started, I remembered everybody in the audience, no matter how many there were. So I remember 1,000 people. But you live and learn in any area. I was going to say in show business, but in any area, you live and learn. I started to realize I could do it. I could remember 1,000 people if I have the time to meet them in front. Obviously, you need the time to meet them. But I started to realize, because the way I did it, I would say with the few people, I always had to use the word few to get the gasp. I'd say with the few people I met stand up, and everybody would stand up, and there was the gasp, I realized that when I had 1,000 people standing and I'm calling their names, telling them to be seated as I call their names, by the time I got to the 300th person, let's say, you get a kind of a persistence of vision or a feeling when you're on stage that you don't get ordinarily. And I started to realize by the time I called off 200 or 300 people, the attitude of the people was saying, okay, we believe you. What else can you do? In other words, you reach a point of boredom.
Less is more.
You got it. You can't do 10 people. Anybody can do that. But you don't do 1,000. What else can you do? So I started to get smart. And I'd go into an audience of 1,000 people. Let's say they're having dinner, so there are 10 people at a table. I'd spread it all over and meet 300. No more.
That's a great suggestion.
Yeah, but then when I said with the few people I met stand up, it looked more than it was, But I knew I don't want to call off 1,000 people. You bore the heck out of people. So to answer your question, I can remember 1,000 people if I have the time, but that's not showbiz in quotes. That's not good, showmanship.
You were a master and an innovator of direct television marketing.
Okay.
And I remember as a child seeing you, and even you started those TV commercials. Were you first promoting the memory course?
It
or
was
promoting
always
your
the,
magic
no,
cards?
always the memory. I never mixed magic with the public.
Mhm.
The only time I did that was when I had when I started to write books for the public. We used to do what's called a boilerplate contract, Roger, meaning there were certain clauses in there that are boilerplate. They're always there. When you become important enough, you can get rid of some of those clauses, but when you're first starting, you can't. And one of the clauses, one of those boilerplate clauses is that the publisher you're working with at this moment always has the option for your next book. That's a boilerplate clause. It's always.
Would you sign it again like that way?
Never. No,
Never,
that's
huh?
the whole point of this.
There's your advice.
No,
Never sign the boilerplate.
But you have to be important enough to do that.
Mhm.
Don't forget, when I first started, I couldn't do that. You don't want to sign the contract? Goodbye, Charlie.
Mhm.
Obviously, I wanted to do the book.
So on television, it was mostly and only memory on television.
Always. The only time was when I wrote the magic book for the public, and that was to get away from one of these publishers that I didn't want to do another memory book for. So my agent, which was a pretty important William Morris agency, after we discussed it, he said the only way is do a book on magic because he doesn't want, he had just done a book on magic. So that's how the magic book came. The first thing to
What
do.
year was that when it was first done?
1977.
And your first television campaign for the memory books?
All for the memory was back in the 90s.
So that
But
started
it
in
was
the
all
90s.
memory, yeah, the early 90s, maybe late 80s.
Mhm.
That was for the memory power, of course. That's the only thing I ever sold on television.
And what was your first television appearance?
Oh boy. The first national, I did a lot
National.
of local stuff,
Mhm.
but the first national was on I've Got a Secret. That was my friend. Now, you want the story on that?
Absolutely.
Of course, you said 5 minutes. We've already done
You guys
an
have
hour.
a few more minutes, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I was dying to get on the television, and I couldn't. And I met a guy who said, I know the producer of the show I've Got a Secret. Gary Moore was the host. So a lot of you young people won't remember it. It was a very important show in those days, I've Got a Secret. The idea was there was a panel of 4 people, and a guest would come on with a secret, and they asked questions supposed to figure out what his secret was.
Mhm.
He said, I know Chester Feldman. Chester Feldman was the producer. He said, I can get you an introduction, then it's up to you. I said, terrific, I'll be the producer of the show. It was a live show, and very important. Gary Moore became a friend, may he rest in peace after this. And I go up to meet Chester Feldman. He's sitting at his desk writing. I'll never forget this. Didn't even look up when I walked in. I stood there till he looked up, and he said, yeah? I said, well, I'm Harry Lorayne. Oh, yeah, the guy called me. Okay, what, you want to be on the show? Yes, sir. What will be your secret? My secret will be that I've remembered everybody's name in the audience. And when I said that, I saw the curtain come down over his eyes. His feeling was, I got a nut here. He's going to remember everybody in the audience.
I'm a sugar and a magician.
I'm a sugar, right, there's 400 people. So I saw the curtain come down, and, I'm pretty good to see these things. And I said, Mr. Feldman, why don't we do this? I know what you're thinking. Why don't you put me on after the show is off the air, because it was a live show, and I'll do it. He said, then he looked up at me. He said, you'll do that for me, Harry? You'll do it off the air? I said, sure. The next Tuesday, Gary Moore announced before the show went on, he said, listen, when we finish the show, don't go away. There's a guy wandering around here right now. He's not a tax collector. He just wants to try to remember your name. So don't leave when the show is over. He wanted to keep the audience. And that's what we did when the half hour or hour show was over on television. Then he said, now, he introduced me. And I did my thing. He had a gun. I'll never forget this, that shot ping pong balls. And he said, after I did it all, he said, whoever catches the ball, what's his name? That kind of thing. But then he said, with everybody he meant stand up, and I did it all. Again, long story short, the next week, I was on the show. That was my first television show. And Gary Moore, I got to tell you, he was wonderful. I had to do camera rehearsal. Well, how do you do a camera rehearsal for what I do? I'm calling off names.
Right.
This was Goodson and Todman, was the production company, very good company. And Bill Goodson.
What year was this about?
1960-something, 1968 maybe.
Did they do the Gong Show?
They may very well have. They were
Or they
very
did a bunch of
important.
different TV talk
Yeah,
shows?
they were very important production, television production. We're doing the camera rehearsal, and I said, how do I do this? It's an empty theater where they did the show. So they said to me, Bill Goodson said, why don't you just pretend Well, that was hard for me to call off Mr. Jones, Mr. Browns, Mrs. Smith. There's nobody there. I did it. And Bill Goodson came running down. He said, wait, Harry, hold it, hold it. He came out of the control booth. He said, can you slow down? We want to get the expression of each person's face when you call their name, because usually people are like, wow, you know. But you know, I had to be honest. I said, gee.
Well, that was your toughest act, to do the memory of an invisible audience.
Not only that, but he asked me to slow down. I said, I didn't want to lose the show. But I knew if I slow down, that kills my mental process. I'm a fast talker, you can see that. That's the way I am. So I hesitated, and Gary Moore endeared himself to me for life, because I'll never forget this. He turned to Bill Goodson, and he said, hey, Bill, wait a minute, Bill told me to slow down. He didn't ask me. He said, slow down so we can get the shot. And that's when I hesitated a little, and Gary Moore said, wait a minute, Bill, you didn't ask Harry if he can slow down. And Gary turned to me and said, Harry, don't pay attention to him. Can you? And I said, true.